Small 3-foot by 5-foot flag went up on top, and their commanding officer decided that was not really good enough, so they sent one guy back down, and I watched him come down. He'd come down a little ways and he'd stop, and then he'd shoot a while, and then he'd get up and struggle down another 50, 60 feet, and then stop and shoot a while. And eventually he made it to the bottom unscathed. There were 5 landing ship tanks on the beach. So I watched him go in the first LST and waited a little while. He came out, and got down, went down up into the second one. Same thing happened. He came down, I think it was either the third or the fourth, when he came out carrying some big elongate package. And he started back up Mount Suribachi with his, lugging this big rolled up flag. And every once in a while he'd drop it and get his gun out and shoot a little bit. And he worked his way back up to the top. He never seemed to get hit. It took about 15 minutes, I guess, before they got the thing rigged up. But then all of a sudden we saw a new big flag raised, and at the same time it was raised, the little flag came down. And when that flag went up, you could hear a cheer over that island like you wouldn't believe. I mean, and then the cheer was taken up by the boats, the ships that were fairly close in. They had klaxons and bells and all sorts of things. The biggest racket you ever heard.
The whole island just exploded. You could hear guys hollering and guns fired off in the air, and the ships at sea were shooting off their foghorns. And
a tremendous cry of joy to see Old Glory go up and to know that we would win the war.
I don't remember the exact day that we left Iwo Jima, but it was within the week after fighting stopped. And we went aboard one of the transports, and it was a lot more somber trip back to Maui than it had been before, because everybody had known people who weren't coming back with us anymore.
On that last morning, I'd be standing up on top of a ridge looking at all that was going on down below at the beach level. As I looked at it, I was reminding of a bit of verse from Rudyard Kipling. We're going home, we're going home. The ships are at the shore, and you must pack your haversack. We won't be back no more.
Iwo was a very, very difficult battle. It lasted 36 days. There were 27 medals of honor awarded in that battle, which is unprecedented in military history.
The plan was Iwo Jima, was, they said, would probably take 4 days, and then we were going to go to Okinawa. But then, because of casualties, they sent us back to Maui, and those that were, those of us that were left, we trained them to go to Japan, invade Japan. And nobody, thinking back, nobody really talked about Iwo, because I think, looking back, everybody in the back of their mind think, boy, invading Japan is going to be worse, which it would have been. So we were all grateful for the bomb.
We boarded ship, and we're all set to head for the invasion of Japan. And we were all on board ship. The ships hadn't left the dock yet when the word came that the war was over.
We were training, and we were, in fact, we were up on the upper end of the island, and it was just as if it came out over the air that the war was over, and the whole island just erupted.
At every little crossing, there'd be cars lined up, and every place where there's a house close to the rail line, people would be standing on the porch and waving. It didn't take us long to figure out that it was all over. It was VJ Day.
They finally let me go. on the 17th of December. And I got out of there and got my pay and hitchhiked in the middle of December back to Illinois. Got home in time for Christmas.
Yeah, well, everybody was glad to see me home. But they didn't know. I didn't talk about it for many, many years. They had no idea where I was or what I'd done, although they did know I was in Japan.
One thing I brought forward was that when I got back, I was just kind of pulling out of my teens, and I realized I was an old man when I saw the civilians of my age.
You saw things and heard things and smelled things that your brain didn't know how to deal with at all. And that smell sticks with me today.
You can't put it behind you completely. In fact, the first year or so when I came back, and then Shirley and I were married, and it worried her a lot because in the middle of the night I'd rear up and start saying, "Kill him, go get him," and all that sort of thing. But that eventually leaves you.
At first, I'd have nightmares for a long time. And people didn't even talk to you about it, even your coworkers where you worked.
I was only 18. To see all these young men, get destroyed, for what? We had to do it to save our freedom and everything else.
I was walking along beside about a 10-foot office building when a car came up from behind me as I walked along the sidewalk with some guys and gals in it were having a big time, and they got up close behind me and hit their horn. I almost jumped over that damn building because I still had shell shock.
You're in a firefight, you can't stop. You see your friend next to you that's as close to you as anybody's ever been in your life. You see him get his head blown off or his arm or get killed. You don't have time to grieve for him. You don't have time to process it in any way. You just have to, your body just says, "I'll stick in the box."
Some tragedies for anybody has to be pushed back in your mind. If you live them, I see guys that did. Some of the guys, went down to the bar. He never quit drinking till he died. Good men too.
I turned into a terrible person after the war. I just couldn't seem to adjust. Started running around with guys. Started drinking, which was unusual for me because I never drank. Didn't have a first drink until I got out of the service.
My doctor at the hospital, when I went to Veterans Hospital the first time, he said, "We didn't used to know what PTSD was." He said, in World War II, they didn't know what that was at all. They called it shell shock or battle fatigue or something. But he said, "We've proved now that if you're in a firefight for 48 hours, you're going to have PTSD of some kind."
One of my buddies that I ran around with, very close buddy, I lost track of him there. And I found out about 4 months later that he died in a gutter up in Chicago of alcoholism. It took him 3 months to find out who he was. Well, I managed to straighten up enough that I went ahead and thought I better get a job, and otherwise I was going to end up the same way he was.
When I got out of the Marine Corps, I tried to push everything in the back of my mind. And it was, as the years went by, guys would say, "What about Iwo Jima?" I would say, "Well, maybe I can put a day and a half together." but after about 40 years, when I retired, then I joined the 4th Division Association, and a buddy got a hold of me, and we went to a few reunions, and a lot of it came back to me then.
People say, well, it's over, it's done, it's in the past, but it's hard to do.
Then I went to work as a volunteer for the Greatest Generations Foundation. which their mission is to take veterans back to the battlefield where they served, at no charge. And I got into it too deeply, working with these veterans, because we never talked about the war, even to our families. But a veteran would come in, he'd talk to me, he wouldn't talk to his family. So I'd cry with him, laugh with him, joke with him. But I had a breakdown in March of 2008. Emotional and mental breakdown. And I went over to the VA, and I had another breakdown there in the guy's office. And he called me a classic case of PTSD. They discovered what it was in 1980. We learned about it a couple years later, but we weren't about to go into the VA at that time because there was a terrible stigma on PTSD. I would have lost my job. But once I had that breakdown, they knew what it was, and I went into treatment. I'm very happy I did. Here I am.
We never gave it a lot of thought in depth. They were, from the very beginning, they were the enemy. I mean, they were the ones who had shot up Pearl Harbor and sunk a good portion of the Pacific Fleet and whatnot.
You can't say you hate them. You're scared of them. You wanted to kill them.
We were trained to destroy the enemy.
They were doing just exactly what we had been trained to do, kill the enemy. I mean, it's a job.
They were the enemy. I was out to do them in, and did.
It wasn't until well after the war that I would have anything to do with anything Japanese for years and years. We began our stint at being a homestay host for foreign students. And we had a lot of young Japanese people then. And they were all very, very nice. So I got over it entirely.
Well, I really wanted to go back, but I didn't know how I'd react when I got back there.
I didn't know if I wanted to go or not. But both my psychiatry guy and the therapist said, well, we believe you should go, so I went. And I got 10 other veterans together who were physically capable of going and wanted to go. So there was 11 of us that went to Iwo by way of Okinawa.
I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go back. And some of the other guys that were in the group that went, Don Whipple, Al Jennings, they wanted to go back. And I thought, well, I'd have the support of the other guys. It was just as emotional for them as it was for me.
I never really gave a good deal of thought about it till I got on the plane that was going to go there, that was going to take us there. We almost didn't get to go.
We flew a commercial into Japan, then over to Okinawa. And that's when we got into trouble. The Haiti hurricane hit while we were there. And the airplane that we were supposed to go to Iwo with was taken away from us. And we were stranded.
And of course, Mr. Perlmutter got a hold of it. And he said, no way are those guys going to get stuck, go that far and not complete the journey. So he went to work in State Department, Defense Department, clear to the president. He got the Japanese embassy involved.
Our good congressman managed to arrange it so that we finally got a plane when we needed it.
We were going to go on a tour of Okinawa when we got the word, and they said, you got 30 minutes to get to the airport.
The plane flew over the island. We looked down at it, and it was green, and everything was completely different.
It was so different because when we were there was practically no vegetation at all on the island.
And it was green. Everything was green. Because before there was nothing but a dirt rock.
I found out that the Marines that had occupied the island until they turned it over to the Japanese had reseeded it with the native plants and whatnot and had started a bunch of trees and all the rest of it. So the island was really a pleasant place to be.
I thought I would probably have flashbacks or something, you know, but the island was green, which it wasn't when we were there. It was all tore up. And the landing strip was very big, so you came in on that landing strip, and at first, approaching it, looking out the window, it looked the same. But then when you landed and all, it seemed so different. And of course, they had roads. And
It was wonderful to be able to get in a car and drive to the top of Mount Suribachi.
Really good. Nobody shooting at you. That's pretty nice.
You had to stay on these roads because of landmines, unexploded shells, and stuff like that.
Took several walks down and went to the beach where we had come ashore. Had to trudge through that shifting sand again, you know.
I could feel it, and I shed a couple of tears thinking about some of my good friends that I lost there.
And some of the guys, yes, did have some problems. They'd kind of break down when they would see something or be in an area where something had happened, you know. And we'd comfort each other. But we concluded afterwards that it had been good therapy for us to be there.
Tim Davis, who is the president of the Greatest Generation, who the trip was sponsored through, he had this long box. And I said, "What do you got in that box?" He said, "I got a golf club." And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" He said, "Well, I got some golf balls in there too." And he said, "When we get to the top of Suribachi, we're going to hit golf balls off of Suribachi." I said, "You got to be kidding." So we got up to the top, and he said, "Come on, Weinmeier." He said, "You're first." So